I grew up on the north shore of Prince Edward Island. And Prince Edward Island is a kind of magical land, like you would imagine it to be, I think. All our commercials, of course, never have winter in them, but we like winter too. We endure it in any case. But, of course, our one main claim to fame is Anne of Green Gables. Ella Montgomery, Lucy Maud Montgomery, grew up just a little ways from where I grew up. I actually went to 4-H in the church that was her home church in Cavendish, Prince Edward Island, and I played in her graveyard and walked down Lover's Lane, and we just grew up with our school and our community doing the things that she did in the kind of the same places, just, like 80 years later. This is the neat thing about growing up in this area, is that one of the things we did was go to Rainbow Valley every year, 2 or 3 times a year. This was like a relatively inexpensive, kind of expensive for my family, but relatively inexpensive place where we can go. There was a water slide park, picnicking areas, like little boats, like those floating ducks and swans that you pedal in, and places to eat and hang out and games to play, and ball pits and all kinds of stuff. We went there for school, we went there for family events, and sometimes we went there for celebrations and church picnics and the like. Well, that's gone. It's now like a provincial park and a nice place to walk, and all those things have been put into other kind of junky places to go and spend your money. It's great. But I still remember Rainbow Valley fondly, and so I was interested some years ago to pick up this book, Rainbow Valley, by Lucy Maud Montgomery. It has nothing to do with the amusement park, although it is about a magical valley. Okay, so Rainbow Valley is one of my absolute favorite of the Anne series novels. Now, you kind of need to think about the Anne series in three chunks. They're in 2 different ways. If you think of the original 6 novels that she wrote in the early, 1905 to about 1920, then there's sort of 2 groups of 3. The ones where that are focused on Anne in and around Avonlea, Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea, and Anne of the Island. And then there are 3 later ones that are in a new community, and these include this one, but first of this, Anne's House of Dreams, and in Four Winds Harbor, and then Rainbow Valley, and then Rilla of Ingleside. Later in the 1930s, when some films came out, and a new Anne of Green Gables film came out, Lucy Maud Montgomery went back and she inserted a couple of stories back into those 2 chunks of books. One in the early chunk, the Avonlea chunk, and then one in the later chunk. So this is the 5th out of 6, or the 7th out of 8, depending how you follow it. But it's one that you can pick up at any time as long as you know the Anne character. Anne has grown up. She is now living in Four Winds Harbor. She's married to her sweetheart, Gilbert Blythe, who's the town doctor. And she has children. Anne's House of Dreams was about the difficult birth of her first son, and I don't want to spend too much time going into detail there, so I don't want to ruin the story. But eventually she has this boy named James, or Jem. They called him Jem. And then they move to a new home, and she ends up having a whole bunch of children, right? She moves to this new place. As always, she names her places, and the new place is called Ingleside. Hence the 2 books, Rilla of Ingleside and Anne of Ingleside. And between them and the local manse, Presbyterian manse, there's this lovely Rainbow Valley, this gorgeous valley that's named by one of Anne's children, Walter, as Rainbow Valley. If you read about all the great things about the valley, often the first few pages, or first paragraph of every chapter, it's described in fairy terms. It's like a fairyland. It's like a heavenly place. It's like a magic place. It's like an Arthurian romance. It's got all of those elements all crammed into one. And it's also the place where people encounter, where they find their courage, where they find love, where they write poetry, where they imagine the future, and, more darkly, where they face the difficult future that is before them. So, two groups of children you've got in this main book. The first group is, of course, the Ingleside children. This is the story of Anne and Gilbert. You've got Jem, the oldest. Then you've got Walter, who I already mentioned, who's like a poet and a bit of a prophet, who always speaks in kind of grand terms for the group. There's Nan Blythe, whose nature doesn't come out very deeply, but she's loyal and friendly. There's Di as well, one of the Ingleside twins with Nan and Di, who are twins, and we don't hear much about Shirley and Rilla, who comes a little bit later and is quite young. But you get the stories of some of these children. It really focuses mostly on Walter of the Ingleside children, and a bit on Jem. And then there's this great group of kids called the Vance children. These are the children of the widowed Meredith, Reverend Meredith, and John Meredith is the absent-minded, not professor, the absent-minded preacher. He's always lost in heavenly thoughts, and his children are growing up absolutely wild. They're good children. They're like beautifully spirited children, but they're just all over the place. And the more they try to make things better, the worse it gets. And so you've got, especially focused on the two girls in the family. There's Jerry and Carl, who are two of the Meredith kids, but it really focuses on the two girls. Faith, whose name kind of represents who she is, who keeps trying to, she's beautiful and intelligent, but she keeps trying to fix things and does it really badly. She's energetic and imaginative, and she's very much the Anne of the next generation. If you take Walter the poet and you take Faith the impetuous girl and put them together, you get Anne as a child. And then Una, who's this delicate little spirit who's just so sensitive, and she understands immediately what adults need and what other kids need. She just has the heart of the thing. It's really kind of neat. Now, they're introduced to a further character named Mary Vance. So the Ingleside children, Anne and Gilbert's kids, and the Vance children, Reverend Meredith's kids, meet in Rainbow Valley and form basically this unit, this club, and they grow up together in this valley over the year and a half that the book takes place. But they also rescue an orphan named Mary Vance, who's a runaway that they take, and they give her clothes, and they help take care of her, and ultimately make sure that she's adopted to somebody in the community. Mary Vance is shocking, ill-bred, and not well-raised, but super hardworking, and doesn't get a lot of wisdom in this book, but she's on her way, and is well taken care of and loved. Well, what's the main conflict of this book? It's really the Vance children and the problem that they face. And Reverend Meredith is well loved by his congregation, but he's under a tremendous amount of pressure because his kids are a mess and he has no clue what's going on. And so from the children's eyes, the best thing that they need to do is figure out how to get their dad married to somebody in the community. That's the tension. Everybody's thinking about it. But of course, the kids are walking around with this imagination of what stepmothers are like. You know the stepmothers from the stories. So it's full with fear and adventure and challenge. And it's really kind of one of those books that's episodes that Ellen Montgomery writes. It's a series of short stories, little adventures that happen along the way with this kind of grand plot that comes together in the end. The person that John Meredith falls in love with is, unfortunately, she's totally available, a great potential partner, wealthy and independent and talented, and she teaches piano and music, but she's not allowed to marry. And so there's your tension. So all of this is going to work itself out in Rainbow Valley as it goes. For me, the greatest thing is not the plot. The plot's nice. It's the characters come alive again, much like they did in the original Anne of Green Gables book. They just pop out. Now, this happens also in Anne's House of Dreams, but it happens with adults. This time, it's children. And you get little bits of Anne all over the place. The second thing that I love is the character of Rainbow Valley itself. The valley is this wonderful place of greatness that's hidden away and given and brought to life by Ellen Montgomery as she writes, with all that kind of characteristic. And so just even reading those passages at the beginning of each chapter is great. And the third thing that I love about this is is the way that it ends. It ends with this dark tinge. This book is written, Rainbow Valley is written just at the end of World War One. It's actually begun in the last few weeks of World War One and finished Christmas Eve after Armistice Day. And that's the way the book ends. It ends with the hint, the possibility that one day these children will grow up, and the boys will be called off to war, and the women will be called to wait at home for their men, to either return or to never return. So, here's my recommendation. My 10-minute book talk is on Rainbow Valley this time. It's a joyous, wonderful book, and it makes a great winter read or a great summer read, either in the beach or at the bedside table next to a fire, whatever. A great read and a lot of fun and a lot of warmth in this book. All right, that's my 10-minute book talk. I'm Brenton Dickieson. Make sure that you subscribe below. Check me out on Twitter at Brenton Dana. And, of course, check out www.apilgriminarnia.com so you never miss any posts, including these 10-minute book talks.